Tonight, arrests in a murder that sparked a diplomatic crisis between Canada and India. Three suspects accused of killing a Sikh activist in BC.
We need to know who's directing them.
And the expanding investigation.
These efforts include investigating connections to the government of India.
Troubling findings about foreign interference in Canadian elections.
A stain on our electoral process.
Plus, universities weigh their next moves after pro-Palestinian protesters dig in.
This revolutionary movement is growing.
We realized that he was choking when his face started turning red.
Also, a student hero and a life-saving lesson. And tributes to the voice of hockey.
He's our hometown boy, and we took great pride every time we called a game.
Remembering legendary broadcaster Bob Cole.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. 3 men are behind bars tonight for the brazen shooting of a Sikh activist in BC. Arrested in Alberta, they're charged in the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. It's a major development in a case that increased diplomatic tensions between Canada and India. Police also released video of a Toyota Corolla they believe was used by the suspects in the time leading up to the homicide, appealing to the public for help. As CTV's Andrew Johnson reports, this is a major step forward, but the investigation is far from over.
11 months after the BC assassination that sent shockwaves through the Sikh community, Mounties announce a major break.
We were able to gather significant evidence that led us to the individuals that were responsible for this homicide.
28-year-old Karanpreet Singh, 22-year-old Kamalpreet Singh, and 22-year-old Karan Brar are each facing 1 count of first-degree murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder in the killing of Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
This investigation does not end here. We are aware that others may have played a role in this homicide.
After evening prayers last June 18th, 45-year-old Nijjar was gunned down in the parking lot of a Surrey, BC Gurdwara by masked men. The 3 suspects arrested in Edmonton and now accused of that murder are Indian nationals who have been living in Canada for the past 3 to 5 years. None of them were known to police.
Good first step, but there are a lot more questions that have been raised by these arrests than there are answers.
Questions like, could the murder have been orchestrated by the Indian government? Nijjar was a vocal supporter of the Khalistan movement, advocating for the creation of a separate state for Sikhs. For that, he was a wanted man in India, even labeled a terrorist.
I'm hoping that this is the beginning of a discovery for all of us as to how far the tentacles of the government of India and gangsters go.
In September, the case sparked a diplomatic crisis between the countries when the Trudeau government said it had credible allegations tying India to the Nijjar killing.
Homicide investigators confirmed for the first time today they are looking into links to India, but wouldn't reveal any more than that. It's been the suspicion since the start in Surrey's Sikh community, where people have now been calling for justice for close to a year. Heather.
CTV's Andrew Johnson in Vancouver. For more, we're joined by CTV's chief political correspondent, Vashi Kapellos. Vashi, what's the reaction from the federal government tonight?
Hi, Heather. The central political question in all of this has always been the accusation leveled by the Prime Minister himself that there is credible intelligence that suggests the Indian government was behind the murder of Mr. Nijjar, back in June. Now, the thing I wanted to know out of this investigation was, has that been confirmed? Basically, can the government now say conclusively that India was behind this? And I think that actually out of this now comes more questions perhaps in that arena than answers. What the RCMP very specifically said is that that is a separate investigation aside from the arrests that were made today, and that investigation continues. They did acknowledge that there are challenges in getting cooperation from India on that front, but didn't really expand on that. So I asked the Minister of Public Safety, Dominic LeBlanc, to do just that. Are they cooperating? Is there any cooperation from India? He implied that cooperation may not be necessary in order for the RCMP to arrive at a conclusion about whether or not India was involved. But despite all the lack of answers, what we do know for sure is that the relationship between our two countries has dramatically changed since the Prime Minister made that allegation. I'm not sure if the announcement of these arrests will change the trajectory of that at any point soon, unless the RCMP is able to arrive at a conclusion one way or the other about India's involvement in this murder. Heather?
CTV's chief political correspondent, Vashi Kapelos, thank you. A public inquiry has determined there was indeed foreign meddling in the past 2 federal elections. It did not impact the overall outcome, but may have played a role in the results in a small number of ridings. CTV's Judy Trin reports.
Over 400 pages, Justice Marie-Josée Hogue concludes foreign actors, mainly China, meddled in the past 2 elections.
Some of these acts have been established while others remain only suspected, are a stain on our electoral process.
Hogue cited 2 cases where there is significant intelligence that Beijing interfered. The 2019 Liberal nomination of Han Dong, where international students were bussed in and threatened with losing their visas. And in 2021, Conservative candidate Kenny Chu lost his seat after being smeared in Chinese media and over WeChat.
So this report is a damning set of conclusions and findings in the first phase of this inquiry about what the Trudeau government has indicated over the last 18 months and contradicts much of what the government has told us over that period of time.
Hogue raised concerns about how officials hesitated to issue warnings and how intelligence wasn't getting to decision makers.
I have found no evidence of any actions taken in bad faith, but I have found that there were some communication problems.
We also need a protocol. What's clear from the report is the absence of sometimes communication or the government even knowing when it should act.
The inquiry heard from nearly 70 witnesses, including immigrants, who want individuals acting on behalf of foreign governments to identify themselves in a registry.
Otherwise, the same infiltration we have experienced in 2019 and 2021 will repeat itself in the 2025 election.
Hogue highlighted problems, but not solutions.
This first phase report is probably going to disappoint many people who expected more bang for their buck.
The inquiry will resume in the fall, and Hogue promises to make recommendations by the end of the year. But that begs the question, will they be implemented in time before next year's election? Heather.
Judy Trin in Ottawa, where students in that city have joined in the pro-Palestinian campus protests now sweeping across Canada. In Toronto, protesters are still on university property despite a deadline to leave. CTV's Adrienne Gobriel on the growing encampments.
A symbol of peace as a Jewish Shabbat takes place inside a pro-Palestinian demonstration, as protesters remain entrenched in the demands being made at university encampments across Canada.
If they're investing in companies that are responsible for war, for military equipment, then that runs against the mandate of a university.
It's been 7 days since the first pro-Palestinian encampments popped up at Montreal's McGill campus. 6 others have followed, including 3 in British Columbia and 3 more in Ontario.
This revolutionary movement is growing.
This was the scene late last night on the grounds at the University of Toronto, where protesters have defied orders to vacate.
When I look around, I see students engaging in a form of protest, but a form of protest that is legitimate.
Yesterday, U of T told protesters they would have to leave by 10 p.m. That never happened. Today, the university issued this statement saying in part that our campuses are private property and we are increasingly concerned about reports of threats, discriminatory language, and hate speech.
They want to make Jews and Zionistic people feel uncomfortable.
U of T law student Solomon Hoffman is also a Columbia University alumni, where protests have turned violent in recent days.
Solomon, you're concerned this could end up being the next Columbia?
Yeah, if you're going to set a deadline, the first thing that you have to do is be prepared to act on that deadline.
Some faculty supporting demonstrators are sharing their concerns that if the authorities step in and break down the encampments, violence will ensue.
If the police are called on the students and they're met with police brutality, it could turn that way.
Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked whether or not he supports the dismantling of these encampments. He declined to give a clear answer, saying it's up to universities and local authorities to ensure everyone's safety. Adrian Gobriel, CTV News, Toronto.
So far, things have stayed peaceful here in Canada. On American campuses, though, scenes of chaos and violence.
Leave the building now! Force will be used against you!
Overnight, police moved in on protesters at Portland State who had taken over the library. And in New York today, officers cleared out encampments at NYU and the New School.
A good operation. No one got hurt. No incidents. Both institutions are happy.
More than 2,000 college protesters have now been arrested across the U.S. A woman who was once one of Donald Trump's closest aides testified at the former U.S. president's hush money trial today. Hope Hicks telling the court how panic gripped Trump's 2016 election campaign after the so-called Access Hollywood tape surfaced, saying she knew the story would be a, quote, damaging development and a crisis. Prosecutors say the revelations made Trump's team more motivated to stifle damaging stories like Stormy Daniels' claims of an affair. Mandatory evacuations are underway tonight in parts of Texas. The state is being hammered with dangerous weather, severe flooding, baseball-sized hail, and a series of tornadoes. This twister touched down outside Dallas, injuring at least 2 people and destroying several homes. And in the Houston area, the downpour flooded streets, leaving drivers stranded. Heavy rain and flooding are also lashing parts of Brazil, killing at least 39 people. Dozens more are missing in the deluge, which has triggered landslides and caused the partial collapse of a dam in Rio Grande do Sul. Authorities say so far more than 23,000 people have been forced to flee their homes. The total cost to bring the World Cup to Canada is ballooning. Vancouver announced this week estimates have doubled to roughly $500 million. Ottawa has already offered financial support for that city and today kicked in $104 million for Toronto's share of the FIFA tournament. Here's CTV's Beth McDonnell.
It's a big funding kick from Canada's Minister of Sport to Toronto's mayor to help meet the balloon costs of hosting 6 FIFA World Cup games in 2026.
The Government of Canada is proud to provide $104.34 million in funding for the Toronto 2026 FIFA World Cup matches.
While the funding from Ottawa helps, Toronto still needs to find ways to pay for the world-class soccer matches. As the bill stands now, the 6 games are set to cost the city $380 million. The new money from the feds, plus the $97 million already provided by the province, means Toronto is on the hook for around $180 million. A large sum as leaders face financial pressures to build housing, infrastructure, and transit.
We will do our best in trying to raise some funds. So we will move ahead. And perhaps the federal government being able to cover some of the security costs, which is about 1/3 of the whole bill.
Because costs tend to increase for large sporting events, there are still concerns over the final price tag. Ottawa and the province both say the plan is to stay within the current budget, not forgetting the benefits.
And the impact from those that are selling gas to selling a pack of beer to restaurants to hotels will be huge. And that's great for everybody.
7 games will also be played in Vancouver. In all, the 13 matches are expected to generate $2 billion in economic activity. During the World Cup, BMO Field will become Toronto Stadium, the soccer pitch for the first ever men's World Cup game on Canadian soil, with eyes from around the world watching June 12th, 2026. Beth McDonnell, CTV News, Toronto.
Coming up, a hockey legend laid to rest.
Nobody had the passion of Bob.
Family and friends bid farewell to broadcaster Bob Cole, plus a new mission to the moon. A man known as the soundtrack to some of hockey's greatest moments was honored today in St. John's. Friends and family gathered for the funeral of beloved sportscaster Bob Cole, remembered for his grit, talent, and the gleam in his eye. Here's CTV's Garrett Barry.
The service had Bob Cole's distinctive flair, his love of Frank Sinatra.
And walk with me.
And for a man who's been called the soundtrack of hockey with his incredible play-by-play, a bit of another distinctive song. Hockey fans and former colleagues paid tribute to a man with a remarkable voice.
Saturday nights, some of us on TV, we had a blank canvas and we painted a barn, and then Bob painted a Picasso.
Dozens came to the St. Thomas Anglican Church in St. John's. Longtime co-worker and friend Ron McLean delivered a eulogy.
We all remember the voice, but I remember the gleam in his eye, which is like the gleam you have when you love someone or something. And Bob, there's no one doesn't recognize that look that he had, which was half mischief and half, master of a craft.
Cole's friends and family said goodbye today. In an obituary online, they wrote, of all the jobs Bob Cole had, grandfather was his favorite. His career spanned 5 decades, some of hockey's biggest moments, and in Newfoundland and Labrador, he was ours.
His voice is iconic, and I'd say he's up there with the Gallivants and the Foster Hewitts and that, but he's our hometown boy, and we took great pride every time he called the game.
As hockey fans across the country get ready for another big Saturday night, many will still hear Bob Cole's voice singing in their head.
He truly cared about the game, cared about the players, and he cared about the poetry that was on the ice. It wasn't a bunch of the stuff around it, the white noise. It was truly whistle to whistle, the magic that enchanted us every Saturday night.
Garrett Berry, CTV News, St. John's.
Princess Anne is in British Columbia and spent the day in North Vancouver, commissioning the first Arctic offshore patrol vessel for Canada's Pacific Fleet.
It's named after Chief Petty Officer Mac Bernays, a Canadian naval hero who served as coxswain of HMCS Assiniboine during the Battle of the Atlantic, and who did show quite outstanding leadership and courage.
It was the princess's first engagement on a 3-day royal visit. She is heading to Victoria next. A new space mission will shed light on the dark side of the moon. China is sending a probe there to collect samples. The rocket launched today, and if all goes to plan, its lander will scoop up some rocks, blast off from the lunar surface, and bring them back to Earth in 2 months. Still ahead, schooled in first aid. The young student who helped save the life of a classmate. A skill learned in class helped a grade 6 student save the life of a classmate. He was choking on food during lunch break, and luckily his friend wasn't afraid to jump in. Proud of the life-saving measures, they showed CTV's Bob Belichico exactly what happened.
This could have ended really badly.
Tony El-Suri was choking on his pasta during lunch hour Thursday.
So I get up to go ask the teacher if I can use the bathroom. And before I even found the teacher, I found that I couldn't breathe.
After a few futile attempts to swallow, panic started to set in.
I ran into the class because I remembered that our teacher taught us for first aid, so we should know this.
He gestured to the 7 others in the classroom at the time.
We didn't know if he was really choking or just joking around, but we realized that he was choking when his face started turning red and there was spit coming down his mouth.
That's when El-Suri's classmates jumped into action.
And then my friend told me to go run and get a teacher, so immediately I went to go run and get a teacher.
Zain Bassam performed first aid.
I kind of panicked, but I just rushed straight ahead because I didn't want it to get any worse. So first I started by doing 5 back blows.
Following the back blows, Bassam turned to the Heimlich maneuver.
It was successful, and then he started throwing up.
El-Suri was fine and went home for the rest of the day. Thankful his teacher, Madame Mary Elizabeth Rousseau, taught the class first aid.
Because I feel like if she didn't teach us this, it could have been a lot worse.
Incredibly happy that Tony was okay. But also incredibly proud of my students for jumping into action, for putting in place the training that they had learned.
Madame Rousseau is certified through the Red Cross babysitting program and taught her grade 6s.
So that they could be confident and competent with basic first aid and know what to do in a situation like this.
Olivia Droulard, an instructor at Second Chance CPR, says call 911 and make some noise if you ever find yourself alone in a choking situation.
What you would want to do is go at least unlock your door or go outside. Maybe there's somebody walking by that sees you and they can help you.
Other things that could help
is you're going to either fall on the top of a table, on a chair, or use an inanimate object like a reusable water bottle to perform self-performed J thrusts.
Bob Belichico, CTV News.
Those students should be proud. Well, Canadian country star Shania Twain is celebrating her biggest songs.
Let's go, girls.
Twain is releasing a limited edition vinyl of her greatest hits, and it's time to come out just before the singer tours throughout Ireland and the UK this summer, including Glastonbury Festival. Well, after the break, a touching tribute. The precious Canadian cargo on its way to Normandy. The pivotal role of a Canadian regiment in helping to bring an end to the Second World War will soon be immortalized in northern France. A statue honoring the Royal Regina Rifles will be placed in Normandy, just in time for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. CTV's Alison Bamford has more.
Precious Canadian cargo headed for France. Inside the crate, a bronze rifleman, sculpted in detail to represent the Royal Regina Rifles.
The detailing on his face shows determination as he's pushing forward to storm the beaches.
The public got a sneak peek of the statue last month, standing 8 feet tall, serving as a small reminder of how big a role the regiment played on D-Day.
They were first to land and made it further inland than any other Allied troops that day, which started the beginning of the end of the Second World War.
Less than a handful of those soldiers are known to be alive today, making this trip to Normandy that much more special.
I'm so proud of my dad and so proud of our veterans.
The statue will be placed in Bretteville, an area more inland, where historians say the regiment played a pivotal role in holding off the Germans. The official unveiling will take place June 5th, just in time for anniversary ceremonies to begin the next day.
It's really special to be involved just in a small part.
Flying the statue part of the way there, Captain Steve Bailey with the Royal Canadian Air Force.
I've learned the importance that the role they played in the invasion and the joint effort that we had with, the Rifles and the Air Force working together to complete the objective. So it's really impressive.
The Rifles already have a small commemorative plaque in Normandy, but by June 6th, the 80th anniversary of D-Day, there will be another focal point to honor those veterans.
As a young man joining the regiment, I looked up to these veterans. They came out to our events and spoke to us, and they were the greatest generation in so many ways.
And those greats will forever be remembered in bronze. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
A beautiful tribute. That's our newscast for this Friday. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow.
CTV National News, Canada's #1 newscast.